Hi, this is Eternal King bringing you another LOR video today. So I'm coming at you with what's going to be the last daily upload for LOR for a little bit. I've got this new 9 to 5 gig that I'll be prioritizing that is going to be very time consuming for me due to the high level nature of the job. So what that means is that you're going to have to enjoy kind of my current content offering for a little bit, and I thought that we would end things off with a pretty fun content idea, and I thought that I would review your decks. So typically in quick play, I see a lot of memes. I see a lot of poor brewing techniques, and so I wanted to take a look at your memes and essentially review them objectively speaking. So first up, we have a Yasuo deck. Talking about Yasuo, I'm already seeing yikes. So just talking about like having a 9 mana top end natural in your deck with 0 ramp, pretty unlikely. Talking about Dragon's Rage. Dragon's Rage is probably the most expensive bounce card you could have in a Yasuo deck without any real payoffs. You wouldn't even run this in a Lee Sin deck. Talking about Yone, Minotaur are okay. I'm not going to say anything there. Obviously, you run the Landmark, you have the Board Wipe, the Will of Ione, and the Strategic Execution, and Concussive Palm, Arachnoid Sentry, Steel Tempest, Fey, Blade Twirler, Ravenous Flock, and then in terms of the Guile, typically you would rather have the Guile Tutor than Guile Natural. Again, some of this stuff is just like not knowing the game, so I'm not going to like give people a hard time. But the thing is, like, you can just run this and tutor out Guile, and you get a chumper for free. Like, there's no reason not to do that in your Yasuo deck. And also, typically, if you want a good Yasuo deck, you would be running things like Vestian Disciple. Vestian Disciple is free cycle power and free turbo Yasuo. Sorry. So like, it bounces, it goes back to your hand, never calls, and it cycles, and it gives you essentially cycle advantage while also turboing out your Yasuo level up faster than everything else. Sometimes people will also run the Mourned as well because it does the exact same thing, and then typically you'll also want to be on Caitlyn. So again, you can cut a lot of the meme top end, sorry, Katarina, not Caitlyn. You want to be on Katarina, right? So typically there's like a lot of meme top end I'm seeing here that you could more or less just like ignore in terms of optimal piloting of your Yasuo deck. Just in terms of like instantly right off the bat stuff that you can do to make your deck better. That's only if you want your deck to win and be good and have some sort of statistical relevance on ladder. Because again, we talk about quick play memes. They're good for about a game. And then you discard them, right? So that's why like a lot of these lists that I'm pulling right now, and I was just curious, I haven't seen them before and I'll never see them again because they are essentially one game memes that the person hasn't really put any effort into building and isn't putting any sincere thought into how they're constructing it, which is a shame because when it comes to the long-term health and success of LOR as a card game, you actually want to build decks good if you can, right? Because I don't think that these decks are actual memes. They're memes when you build them like memes. If you build a deck archetype like crap, it's going to play like crap, and then you're going to have to only get one game out of it. But if you build the deck properly, there's no reason why Yasuo Katarina can't be statistically relevant. There's no reason why you can't win 53% of games with a optimal Yasuo Katarina deck. There's no reason why you can't track stats for an optimal Katarina Yasuo deck. There's no reason for it. There's absolutely no reason that you can't do that, except for the fact that you put in a bunch of crappy cards into your deck. That basically means that you memeified it. Well, like, why would you do that unless you're just either new to the game, 2, you have no ladder experience, or 3, you have no eternal experience where you know that putting in an arbitrary top end into your deck is just bad, right? Like, you just don't know because you don't have the experience. This December, I encourage any of these people that I'm reviewing the decks for to essentially take your memes on ladder. Track stats for them. Upload them to Runeterra AR. Tell people that you've gotten to Plat, that you've gotten to Diamond, specifically by piloting this deck. This deck only. For at least 20 games. If you do that, then it's a good deck. It's that simple. There's a reason why my decks get tracked and other people's don't. It's because that the foundations of them are strong, right? Duplicate Nightfall, Emp Army, competitive Rise. You know, again, Rise is not a good deck statistically speaking, but I still got tracked for the best version because I actually put thought and effort into the way that I constructed it. You can do the exact same thing with Yasuo Katarina. You don't need to have, you know, 3 Dragon Strikes in there. Like you can, but why would you? Why would you have 3 Dragon Strikes in your Yasuo deck? You don't. That's the answer. You simply don't. Let's move on to the next meme. So let's just delete that right away as an inferior version of Yasuo that needs more time in the oven. Next up, Azir Hecarim. Azir Hecarim being a deck that I played around with before, it is typically inferior to Blade Dance. Let's talk about the things I do like and things I don't like. I think Neverglade Collector is a sleeper card. I think that it provides a lot of traditional swim value in an ephemeral deck that is decent. Sandcrafter, also not terrible. Specifically in this deck where you just have no other good token generation. Yeah, Chamber of Renewal, you slam your Hecarim on it. Yeah, you know, we start getting into like, oh, I'm not as certain what's happening here. So for example, you're splitting the ratio between Opulent Foyer and Emperor's Dais, and I'm not sure why when Emperor's Dais is just the better card. There is absolutely no reason why you should be going for Hollowed support in your Azir Hecarim deck. It's not a Gwen deck. If you want to play Azir Gwen, go nuts. But it's not an Azir Gwen deck, so you cut that, right? This is fine. So 3 dominations, typically what you want to be doing. And let's say we also cut this, because we're trying to be competitive, right? We're not trying to meme. So we put in domination. Great. We have Desert's Wrath, because we're not memeing that hard. We're just pretending to meme. And then we have Emperor's Dais. We don't need this. Rite of Calling. I don't think we need that either. Emperor's Dais on 2. We'll just do Emp. Right, and then you're here, right? And you're doing this. You're on Emperor's Army and Emperor's Dais, and you have your various token generations, and then maybe you have your draw fixing off the 1 drop as well, right? You've got your draw fixing, or you're doing your acceleration. You're either Oblivious Islander, or you're doing your draw fixing, right? But again, like, there's no reason why Azir Hecarim. Now, obviously, statistically speaking, my version of Emp Army, which is Blade Dance, is just superior. It's superior across the board. But other than that, there's no reason why you can't just run a good Azir Hecarim deck if you wanted to. There's nothing stopping you for attempting to track stats and just running a good Azir Hecarim deck if you wanted to. Now, obviously, Emp Army would be very, very important. In terms of its inclusion, specifically number 3, when you summon an ally this round, give it 2+0. You could actually slow roll the Emp Army and then just trigger it when you can just trigger it when Hecarim is, you know, swinging. When Hecarim swings and you're getting Spectral Rider. When Hecarim swings and you're getting Spectral Rider, you're actually getting these Spectral Riders buffed coming out, right? So any sort of token generation, whether it is from Sandcraft or whether it is from Hecarim, it will be coming out buffed by your deck. Another card to seriously consider, instead of, you know, these things, if you find they're a little heavy, another card to seriously consider would, of course, be the other ephemeral buffer for 3 mana. If you're just trying to keep the deck low to the ground and efficient, you might want to take a serious look at the one that generates the... let's get out of Shurima just so I can limit my card selection here. Looks like less of a mess. Here we go. Moonlit Glenkeeper, right? Moonlit Glenkeeper would be a very obvious way to essentially buff your token generation along with domination. That would be very, very efficient. So, again, reviewing things like exactly how much domination you want, how much Moonlit Moonlit Glenkeeper you want. Your inclusion of Emp Army over the Opulent Foyer, which is just like an obvious thing that Emp Army is better. This sort of stuff you want to be looking at in terms of building an efficient Azir Hecarim deck. So again, de-memifying your memes so that they can actually be potentially tracked for stats and be relevant, because there's no reason why they can't be. This is kind of the thing that I keep pressing home, that like, Rise is not a good deck. So why is my version of Rise the only one that's appropriately tracked right now in terms of the stats, right? Rise is not a good deck. Period, full stop, it's not. But it's the only version that can get tracked for stats, or is being tracked for stats, simply because I approached it with, I think, the amount of seriousness and decorum that you should approach building any deck, if you can. Generally speaking, that's the way to go. And then, yeah, finally we have one more meme to review today. We're looking at Stinky Dragon, so that's a Rastin. Talking about a Rastin, if, again, whoever built this deck wants to tell me why you're not on Mordekaiser. Typically, Mordekaiser is the only reason to be playing a Rastin. So yeah, and then I understand the Battling Bird will cycle for the Rastin, so that's not bad. But there's really no reason why you're not specifically playing Mordekaiser to duplicate a Rastins and get more of that pressure going. Because otherwise you're basically left with just like vanilla Soul Cleave Rastin, and I guess you're going to give it Ephemeral so it gets out faster, and then you're going to duplicate it with Iron Conquest, and there's a lot of stuff here that's a little memey. So it's mostly, I understand what you're doing. You're playing accelerators, so that's an accelerator. You're playing a bunch of random control cards without possibly the appropriate number of chumpers to hit, you might not have enough creatures in this deck to hit triple Hate Spike and Death's Grasp. Like, you might not have enough. There is not actually that much in the way of chumpers and creature pressure. So, you go into essentially Hate Spike, you're 2-1, all your vanilla 2-1s, and then your opponent just pings in response, and then you don't get the Hate Spike or the Death's Grasp because you don't have the appropriate creature support package to make the value last there. Scholarly Pioneer is just vanilla challenger unit with landmark removal. Then you have, again, your Sigil of Storms, which is more accelerators for your Rastin. But yeah, specifically the only combo cards or combo enablers for a Rastin is Soul Cleave Rastin. So unless you exactly have those two cards in your hand, you don't get to play what your deck is trying to do. The Lysandra by itself is not doing anything. And then again, we already talked about how the Hate Spike plus Death's Grasp, there isn't the appropriate creature support package to make that work. And, I guess you could, you're going to be copying your draw package that you haven't ratioed out fully. So, like, you're going to play, what are you Iron Conquesting? You're Iron Conquesting Ceaseless Sentry or Avarosan Sentry. But that's really your whole game plan, just to play Avarosan Cyclers to chump up the board. Ephemeral Sentries to chump up the board. That's your whole game plan, just so you can get into your combo faster. You might want to ratio that a little more confidently, and you might want to run removal that is less creature focused, right? It's less, your opponent can just counter you with a ping, like a Pie Toss or something, or a Pokey Stick. When you try to Death Grasp a 2-1, you're going to get Pokey Sticked, and then you're going to be very sad, because the value package just isn't there. But, out of the three, this is probably the best one. Just being fair that, you have two Vengeances, so you have pings, you have removal cards in the deck, you have Ruination, because a Rastin can't die. So, out of all of these three decks that we looked at today, this is probably the one that's the most worth exploring. I don't think it's the Dragon Strike deck. I don't think it's worse Emp Army. It's probably going to be a Rastin. Out of all the decks in terms of what's going to get picked up and be unique and have statistical relevancy, it's probably the deck that nobody's playing, right? It's probably competitive Rastin in terms of relevancy, as opposed to just bad versions of other decks that already exist. That's the most likely. But anyway, I hope that was fun. We can do another one of these when I find the time. Again, new job, going to be very pressing. It's a very important job that will take up a lot of my time. But if you thought that these meme reviews were fun, if you thought it was interesting to look at how other people build decks, other streamers, other high tier players, what have you, it typically is like, I take an acceptable archetype and then I put in bad cards. Aren't I funny? And like that's usually how they do it, right? Like Yasuo with Dragon Strike. That's not a thing. You've essentially taken a valid archetype and you've made it so that you will not reliably be winning games. Period, full stop. You will not be reliably winning games because you included a card that you essentially don't want to draw. Right, like what if this was just something dumb, right? Like just put in a card that has absolutely no relevancy to your archetype, and you're playing Yasuo, but then you're also running Sugary Snare. Why not? Place an ally on the bottom of your deck and summon the top ally of your deck. Why not? Put it in a put it in a Yasuo deck. Like why not? Why not just run that card? Because statistically speaking, you're gonna have when you play enough games, when you're not just playing one-off bait decks for one game, when you run 10 games, when you run 20 games, the random card that you put in your deck will eventually lose you the game. Just objectively speaking, it will lose you the game to run the bad card in the potentially viable deck. But you need to play enough games to know that. You need to have the experience with the archetype to know that. You need to know how to build statistically relevant decks to care that there are bad cards in your deck. That's the thing, is you need to actually have experience with the law of large numbers to know that it's going to bone you in the long term. If all you do is build one-off bait decks, then that's all they ever are. If you're just like, I build a deck, I destroy it, I build a deck, I delete it, I build a deck, I delete it, I build a deck, I delete it, no one's going to care. They don't matter. They won't matter on ladder. They won't matter to the pro player scene. And they sure as hell don't matter to me. So I would say that, again, if you guys had fun with this review session, we will keep doing this. But this is kind of the format that I see in terms of the way that other people build decks. They essentially have the one deck they can play, which is Eddie. That's the one deck they can play. And then they have meme decks that essentially either need to high roll their hand state or not draw the bad card, or only function and exist for one game, because otherwise they're pointless. This is Eternal King signing out.